My name is Lou Sheppard, and I wanted to start just actually by saying thank you for inviting me here. I'm not I think a lot of people have been saying I'm not a musician, or I'm not a new musician. I actually come from visual arts, but I think it's really exciting to get to talk to musicians about what I'm doing, and to an inter-arts crowd about what I'm doing. And I think it's really generous that you invite me here to talk about it, because I feel like I'm here as a bit of an outsider. So thank you so much for bringing me in. And I'll go through. I've got a lot to show, but I think I won't have time. So probably at some point I'll run out of time, and then I'm really happy to continue conversations as they go. So I'll just say that out of the start. Visual art. This is my studio. This is a studio in Paris that I just occupied. It was really lovely to be in Paris to work on lots of things. And part of what I was working on, I'll show you as we go. But I like to show this just to kind of give you an idea of process for me and how it works. I tend to be really rhizomatic in how ideas come together, and messy as well. About a year and a little bit ago, well, maybe I'll back up. My practice started from NASCAD. I worked in visual arts, like doing a lot of video and some other stuff. And then I went back to school and I started studying theory, critical theory, queer theory, and I started thinking a lot about wilderness and metaphor, and how to depict wilderness, and how wilderness is depicted, and how wilderness is a colonial concept in many ways, and how I could add my voice to that conversation. So I got invited a year ago to go to Antarctica to kind of address that idea of how to talk about wilderness and wilderness of Antarctica. And so I was trying to figure out how I would approach this idea of an Antarctic wilderness, and I thought really the way to do it was through metaphor. So I started with a sort of simple metaphor, which is that the coastline of Antarctica could be mapped to a musical staff. And that's what you see here. This is a portion of, I think, like 28 feet of drawings, or maybe a bit more, that trace the outline of the coastline of the Antarctic Peninsula, and then map it as though it's music. So for many of you, that'll be really familiar. There's a picture of me performing the piece in Antarctica. I rented that speaker from Long and McQuaid, and they were like, "Do you want the insurance?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think." They were like, "Are you?" I was like, "I'm just gonna take it. I'm gonna travel with it." It's like what I said, and they were like, "Uh-huh." And then as I was like slinging it in a dry bag, like off of a Zodiac, like onto the Antarctic shore, I was like, I feel like they should have sponsored me to do this. Like, come on. Anyways, they didn't, but well, maybe later. So the composition I played through computer, because I actually don't play piano, sadly. I wish I did. But I wrote it for piano, wanting it to, because piano, I think in my mind, maps most easily, or becomes most easily like a map. Like there's an analogy there in between the space of a piano, spatially. But I can play you just a little tiny clip of the composition, which is about 18 minutes long. And I'll stop it halfway through, because and then in the interest of time, I'll just stop it there. But if you're curious to listen to it, or if you want to see the score of it, I can share those with you, but they're also on my website. So I have had the opportunity to have other musicians collaborate with me and play this. And these are two musicians playing at the Pushkin Museum in Russia, which is a weird place for it to be played, except that the Antarctic crew that I was going with was Russian, so that's why there was this Russian interest. But so I'm always really excited to see what musicians do, where the process that I undertook was really methodical, And then in giving the score over to musicians, there becomes this like aspect of interpretation. So like I'm always really excited about that. But just to prove that actually real musicians have played that score maybe. So in traveling in Antarctica and thinking a lot about ice and this idea of like these sort of wilderness spaces, or these spaces, uninhabited spaces, or these spaces that are perhaps by this action of going to it and making art about it being colonized, I got really interested in like what ice is and like this idea of like the whiteness of ice and like et cetera, et cetera. And I got really interested in this data set that I could find from a place called the National Snow and Ice Data Center. And every day, these people in Colorado upload an image of the sea ice concentration in the north. So you can see like Greenland, Alaska, Russia, and Canada sort of in the one on the far left. And then of the south, so the sea ice in the Antarctic surrounding the continent. And I thought, well, similarly to how I'd done with the Antarctic Peninsula, I thought I could map this ice to a musical score as well, which is what I managed to do that with the help of a computer programmer. And this is just a little short video that'll kind of show you how it sounds. So every day, there's a new composition that's created by this computer program based on the perimeter of the ice. Just turn it up a little. I'll just stop that there. So these folks that you saw playing these pianos were at the Banff Center, which is who helped me make this piece. There's a programmer there named Kenny Lazowski who helped me actually program it, because that is also something I don't do. Haha, like interarts. But anyways, the idea was that it plays on computer on a website, and I can just show you quickly the website, and you're welcome to go and see it. I can't actually get the sound to work on this program, or like this setup. I don't know quite why. But basically you can go in every day, and the score is like 3 days behind, but you can play what the ice sounds like and listen to it. And for those of you that like scores, you can also download the MIDI and then export them as actual scores, which I have done. And yeah, so you can see this animation comes through, but the sound unfortunately is not working, but it'll work on your computers, I promise. Yes, thank you. So those are the two major projects that I wanted to kind of show you. But my practice has started intersecting with music in a lot of different ways, or with sound in a lot of different ways. So just to go really quickly to give you a few examples, this is actually a piece that I did that was referencing the tide in the Bay of Fundy, which is close to where I'm from. And this piece is called Tide Phase. So I took the predictions of the heights of the tides for 28 days, looped it, and then created a kind of phasic, like long phasic composition that lasted for like 5 or 6 hours. But what you see is the cut paper above is also a score. That's actually the score of the 28 days worth of data. So in thinking about this idea of scores and sort of like the way that sound can be kind of visualized, I think, and then leading me to think more about like the way that process can be visualized, I started referring to scores in my work quite a bit. And this idea that scores become a way of talking about process, or a way of indicating process, or even suggesting process. So yeah, this is my Bay of Fundy score. And just to quickly, you can just quickly hear what that sounds like. So these are all the predictions coming in. And then they start to loop with each other. So I'll leave it there, just in the interest of time. So yeah, as we keep going, continuing to work with like this idea of graphic scores and playing with, I apologize for the quality of these photos. I actually just did these at a residency last week, so I didn't have good documentation. But playing with this idea of graphic scores and a process, and playing with the idea of mapping and topographical maps and resource allocation maps, and how to actually kind of subvert that data and question that data, of course, because mapping is about kind of controlling landscape or controlling our understanding of landscape. So this is another one that maps the differences in the topography to a musical score, kind of to like see if there's any kind of harmonic similarities between what's happening. And then, am I at like 2 minutes now? Maybe? Yes. Okay, great. I'm just going to quickly go. So then, just to give you like a little indication of like where things have gone since then, I've been working a lot with other kinds of ways of visualizing sound, like spectrograms, of course, and translating those into gestural notation. So actually like making ways to create sound into gesture. So this is actually a memorial project that I did called 27 Names Published on a Website. And I was reading these names of these people that have been killed because of this political attack, and then translating them into gesture and performing them. That's a picture of me performing it there. I look great. And then maybe I'll skip over this project because it's a bit complicated to explain. But I started working with sacred harp notation, which was really fun. Oh, there it is. And just last but not least, like coming into this idea of working with scores and maybe not so much music, but working with dance. The last piece that I was doing, or that I just recently finished doing, was a piece of finding a notation in the spaces in between a text and using a dance notation called La Bande notation, which is like a really geometric notation, and then working with another score from that, and then finally working with a dancer to perform that score. And the text that it's using is from the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Gender Dysphoria. So this is a text that diagnoses, basically it's like if you want to get health services as a trans person, you have to get diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is problematic, obviously. But I became really interested in the way that this text constructed a person or constructed an identity. And then I wanted to look for like gestures of rebellion or like sort of dissent or like even just room to breathe or to move within that construction. So the score that resulted looked like this, and this is a dance score that then I worked with this dancer, Lily Davis, who some of you from Toronto might have run into. And we worked together to create a dance piece, and this is in the gallery in Halifax where we installed it. But I'll just give you, like, it's a 30-second clip of the dance, and the audio in the background is me breathing as I read the text. So it's like kind of composed of the breaths that I took as I was reading the text. That's it. Thanks so much.